Well, we are here with another episode of the Revolution Leadership Podcast. I'm Chris, and I am here with Nick Bogacz with our first ever Zoom podcast session. I'm super excited. Nick, I got to meet over Clubhouse, actually, a Clubhouse chat. I think we're talking about leadership or business or entrepreneurialism, something like that. But we started chit-chatting a little bit, and I was like, I got to get Nick on the show because he's got an awesome story. Sounds like he's doing some really cool things in the area of pizza and maybe other things. Who knows? Maybe he'll surprise us on the show. But yeah, we're here with Nick, and Nick, I'll let you take it away and kind of give maybe a little bit more details about kind of who you are and what you do, and maybe some of your hobbies.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it. I'm Nick Bogacz. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I run Caliente Pizza and Drafthouse. I founded the company in 2012 after being in the pizza industry for 16 years, making money for everybody else. And I decided if I was going to do this forever, I had to do it for myself and for my family. So within the last 8 years, we've built 5 locations. There's 150 seats in each, about 30 taps on 30 different beers on rotation. Like I mentioned, 150 different seats. We do pickup, delivery, dine-in. We have in the last few years, we went to the International Pizza Expo in Las Vegas. We've won awards as world's best pan pizza, world's best non-traditional pizza, and the world's largest pizza stretch. And then I was named to the World Pizza Champions team, which is a team that travels all over the world and competes internationally. And we won the best American pizza in Parma, Italy in 2019. So I'm in the pizza industry space. And I also am an author, a podcaster, dabble in some real estate and other investments. And I just really excited to be here with Chris, because if there's one thing that really has led to my success, I can't say that I was a chef or anything like that had a lot of grandma's secret recipe in the pizza industry. But what I learned over the 16 years in my development was how to be a leader. So I'm really excited today to be here with you, Chris.
That's awesome. Well, like I said, we're super excited to have you. Real quick, before I start grilling you with questions, what is a pizza stretch?
So that would be like where you take a 20-ounce dough ball and you try to stretch it as big as you possibly can get it. And because the international competition, they do everything in centimeters. So one of my guys was able to take this out to about 108 centimeters. So, just picture a big giant pizza stretch, and then you got 5 minutes to take this dough ball, stretch it out without ripping it. And then they count down to say, okay, 10 seconds. And you have 10 seconds to lay it down on the floor and spread it out as wide as you possibly can. And then 3 guys come out with measuring tapes, and they measure it all up from corner to corner and decide how many centimeters your pizza stretch is.
Sweet. Okay. So like the dough quality is it a correct assumption to say that dough quality is based on how stretchy it is, or?
Well, so it's interesting, everybody uses the same dough at these competitions. We've been to different competitions where we've gone and the dough has been really, really rough, like very tight. And, 108 centimeters would be like a great stretch. There's been times we go to a competition, you're lucky to get 40 centimeters because the dough is so tight. So there is some merit to your question.
Sweet. Well, cool. So I know some of the stories that you have, but our audience does not. But I would love to hear, obviously we're here talking about leadership, kind of in the space of kind of young leaders or up and coming leaders. But I would love to hear maybe just a couple stories from your experience pertaining to leadership that you feel like would maybe be helpful for our listeners. Those can be fictitious stories, or it can be stories from your own experience, whatever you like. But I'd love to hear from you just about how leadership has impacted your life and your career. What's been impactful to you about the leadership space?
Absolutely. I think what's really interesting with my story is I was learning a lot of leadership skills at a very young age, and I really didn't realize it till later on. And that's what's interesting, because as young leaders and young people, you pick up different skills when you're younger that really become valuable when you're older. And how it really worked for me was I have 3 brothers, so I'm one of four boys. My older brother's 7 years older than me. So when he was 18, he went off to college. And really, I would became pretty much the oldest then. I was about 11 years old, and my younger brothers were 7 and 5. So it was like 11, 7, and 5. It was the three of us for really the next 4 or 5 years that my brother he went to college in Florida. So from Pittsburgh, we saw him at Christmas, and we saw him at maybe not even Thanksgiving, but we'd see him, maybe at Christmas, and maybe a little bit a month or two in the summer. So it was one of those things that it was me and my two younger brothers a lot growing up through those next 4 years. And we had a youth foundation right down the street from us, right down the hill, that we could walk to. Basically like it was a YMCA, but it wasn't a Y, it was a local youth foundation. So we would go there, and they had all kind of activities. And my parents always put us in every activity. I can't say I really took a sport and played it my whole life, but I did everything. We, as me and my brothers, we did everything. They had craft activities, karate, floor hockey, baseball, flag football, just about anything you can imagine. Each season they had something, and each season we would do some sort of activity. I think it was a way for my mom to get some peace and quiet to put us in all these activities all season, year long. So that was a lot of fun for us. And really, I was a skinny beanpole. And, what that translates to sometimes was coach. Being a youth foundation, they let the younger kids be the coaches. So like as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy, I could be the coach of the 6 and 7-year-old kids. So it was really neat that way, that you could be, a 13-year-old kid being a coach. And really, coaches is a great spot for leaders, and when preparing me for this interview, you had asked about, who's my favorite leaders. A lot of them are coaches, because coaches can be great leaders in the way that they motivate their teams, and they get everybody to buy together for one common purpose. And that's really what I was learning at a young age. So I would be the floor hockey coach. And what I learned is, we would have these practices a lot, because really they would say, okay, here's the schedule, here's your 12 games for the season, and that's it. But I wanted to win, and I wanted our teams to win. So we would set up, hey, Thursday night at 6:00, they have open gym. Let's have a floor hockey practice. And then we'd set them up like that. So, I'm running it very professionally, that where once a week we're having practices where the other teams aren't. And and we would have, the parents loved it, because they now, rather than getting their kid out of the house once a week, they're getting their kids out of the house twice a week. Some of the parents would buy pizza and say, hey, for your practice, we're going to buy pizza for you guys. And, and it became a really cool thing. And then we'd win championships, and we would practice skills. And I loved, sports was everything to me, even though I wasn't very good at them. I loved to coach the kids, and we would win these championships, and all the kids would always want to be on my team. And it just became this really fun thing throughout my teenage years. I spent so much time in the gym and down at the youth foundation coaching. And then baseball was always my favorite sport, but it was the sport that the parents actually coached. You couldn't coach baseball. I was this great youth coach that was winning floor hockey championships, and flag football teams were winning championships. But when it came to baseball, that's when these parents were real serious. But because of how great I was coaching their kids, I became their scorekeeper, their third base coach. And, I was the umpire during the season. And they let me go ahead and be the third base coach, like I mentioned, or the scorekeeper. And I was, and the kids loved me, because I coached them the other 3 seasons of the year I was coaching them. So they knew me really well. And I was able to, and my brothers were on these traveling baseball teams, because they actually weren't skinny bean pools. They were pretty good athletes, and they had a lot more eye-hand coordination than myself. So they were great athletes, and I was able to be their baseball coach. And it just became this thing that I didn't even realize till later on, looking back in my career, how much that had an impact at a young age, all those leadership skills that I was learning. So I think when you get into the world of business, you can't underestimate communication and leadership. And I really feel like leadership and communication go hand in hand.
Man, I want to hear where that's leading, because I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, leadership and communication. That's something, here at Rev 5 we teach that quite a bit. So let's dive into that a little bit. How have you seen sometimes in your life where that plays out? What delve into that a little bit more, leadership and communication.
Sure. So at a very young age, 21 and 20, my wife and I had our first child and got married. So we were very young, and this is just 20 years ago. And I think maybe if you say 30 or 40 years ago, it might have been more common practice, but it wasn't really that common. It was sort of like today where you're starting with a lot of things stacked against you. If you're that young and starting out a family, you really are financially and everything else. It's tough. And I was delivering pizzas at the time. And I realized I also had dabbled a little bit inside the restaurants and, having great communication skills. I was always one of the favorites. And I realized, okay, if we're going to start a family, I need to go ahead and become a general manager. Like, that's what I need to do. I need to be head of the store because, being a 19-year-old kid and a little cocky and, already being a manager, I'm thinking, I don't need to go to college. I'm a manager. I've already made it in life, So that was going to be my path was management. And I needed to be a general manager. So I worked my way up. The store that I worked at that was delivering pizzas, their owner was the general manager. So I couldn't go any farther than assistant manager. And I was a really good assistant manager, but I knew I needed to be a general manager. So when I went to a location, that's when I left like a mini chain and went and worked for the big dog, for Papa John's. So here I am, a 22-year-old kid, basically. And at this point, I already had another kid because my kids are 18 months apart. So here I am with two babies at home. And I'm pitching myself to Papa John's. And I'll give your listeners one of my favorite questions in an interview. This is very impactful. It is a great question. At the very, very end of the interview, they always ask you this question: do you have any more questions? And the best question to ask is, I do. Is there any reason you wouldn't hire me? That is the best question, because if there's any reason that they wouldn't hire you, it comes out right then and it gives you a chance to come back to it. So what they said to me was, they said, yes, the reason we wouldn't hire you is because this staff is all 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, and you're basically just a kid yourself. And we're not sure that you could lead this team. We really need, we're looking for somebody older, for somebody that can lead this group of kids. So, that question was fantastic. I've used it over and over, and it gave me the chance to tell them, well, yes, you may see my age and think that I'm a kid, but I have two small babies at home that are my kids and my family. And I take this very seriously. And I said, I'll be able to lead this group because they're going to be able to relate to me because of my age, but I'm going to take it very, very seriously. I want this more than anything. And we're going to win. We're going to make this a profitable store. We're going to make this store known in the community. And I'm going to be the guy that does it. And they went from telling me, we'll call you in 2 weeks, to saying, here's the offer. Can you start next week? So awesome. That was one way that I thought was, okay, here I am. I just got this job because I asked a great question that there was a tip from one of my best friend's parents who's a headhunter, gave me that question. I used it. And now, all right, I'm in charge of all these 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids. I better put my money where my mouth is.
Right.
So I did. I built a team, and the same way I would build these teams when I was younger, I didn't realize it at the time. Even when I was 22, I just went in and, a lot of things work in leadership, eye contact when you meet somebody, shaking their hand when you meet them, being genuine, not telling BS, not telling everybody what you're going to do, but showing them by action what you really are capable of. A great place in the restaurant or anywhere, really, you could take this metaphor and use it anywhere. Great place for a manager in a restaurant is to do the dishes. I would do the dishes in the very beginning a lot, so people could see me in there doing what's unquote, the lowest part of the restaurant job is the dishes. So, in any spot that you're in leadership, doing that lonely part makes a big difference. And then, building that team together that they see, hey, this guy isn't a a BS artist. He's actually going to do these things, and we want to get behind him, and then, hiring the right people, bringing in the right people for a team is really important. If you've got a team of great people, you don't want to bring in that bad attitude. I think a lot of times you see that in sports. You've got this great team. They're like one player away from winning, and they bring in that mouthy, cocky wide receiver, and then next thing you know, they go 8-8 the next year, and nobody can figure out why, because they were 12-4 the year before. It's because they brought in a bad attitude, and that, the rotten apple starts to spoil the barrel. Like, that's a lot of what that is. So you want to be real careful once you build this team of who to bring in. And then when you talk about the communication side of it, it's just like taking the temperature of the room. You're asking, hey, how are you today? How's everything going? You can ask them, questions about anything new. How's the family? How's your life going? Oh, you, for younger kids, you started your swim meet. Like, how's swimming going? What's the difficulties in there? Just some real interest. You don't want to come off that you really don't, that it's not genuine, but really take some interest in these people, because at the end of the day, people are only going to care about you till you care about them first. They won't care about you till you care about them first. So that's what you have to make sure you do. You have to buy in and care about them, and then they will care about you and they will follow you.
Yeah, man, that's good. Yeah, I heard a few things in there. I think one of the themes when you were talking about, that final question that you were able to ask your interviewers, I think that's key, is being able to accept feedback, honestly, because I think if you can be proactive in saying, okay, I know that it's not a yes or no yet, but I'm willing to grow. I want to grow, and this isn't anything personal. This is for me. I want to figure out how I can improve. I think it's huge. I heard, I don't remember who it was a podcast or something, but they were saying how, when you, it might've been a dating thing, but they talked about interviewing and like dating. And anytime you're in some kind of new relationship or interaction with someone, when you're done, come back to them and say, okay, now, how was that? How was that for you? Give me some feedback on our interaction. If you can just step away from it from a second, tell me how I came off. Was it awkward for you? Was it good? Was my eye contact okay? But be willing to accept feedback, because it takes a lot of humility to accept that. But when you do, you can really grow and leaps and bounds. So I love that side of it, and I love how you're talking about communicating with people. Managers, I think a lot of times when people are in management, they think that it's about maybe controlling people or just oversight. It's very objective, but the best managers I've ever had are really high touch. They're very much, they're a friend, so there's still respect involved, but there's also, you can tell that they care about you. And I think that's one of the things that you were highlighting was, always have constant little touch points with people, make sure that they know that you care about them as a person. So.
Right. And the worst managers, to flip it for you, are the ones that hide in the office, smoke a million cigarettes, go to the store because we need something, that disappear, that aren't there. But you're right. The guy that's right next to you or interacting with you or those touch points are just so key. You're absolutely right there.
Yeah. So I'm curious, let's flip the script a little bit. So let's say that someone wants to come and work for you. Let's say in management. What are a few key things that you're looking for? Let's say their resume is pretty good, but how do you vet for someone? How do you tell that they really are who they say that they are on their resume? What's some of the, from the perspective of someone who's been through the entire chain of command, what are some things that you're looking for in someone that you would hire on as a manager?
I think those are great. That is a great question, because, that's why I love what you're doing so much, that a lot of times people come out and they have these podcasts and they really don't have an audience. Like, your audience is young people. And I think it's so important, because a lot of times somebody like myself didn't have these resources back then, that you'd have to learn from all the mistakes that you make. So, I can give you some great tips right off the bat, and you can't underestimate how important it is to be on time. That is step one. If you're going on an interview for somewhere, be on time. And if you say to them, something about, I'm going to call you back, or I'm going to follow up, or I'm going to send you an email when I go back, or hey, what's your availability for schedule? I'll email that to you later. If you say something like that, whatever you say, do it. That's another one. So you want to be on time, if you make anything that promises that you say anything, you do that, be true to what you say. And appearance does matter, even in this day and age where it's more common to have piercings, tattoos, and there's also like that part of like, well, that's my personality is part of my look. I'm not saying you can't have those things, but also wearing a nice shirt compared to the shirt that you would go out on a Saturday night, that makes a difference. So sure, you can have the tattoos, the piercings, but a nice, crisp shirt would make a big difference. Maybe a nice pair of shoes versus, your beat up tennis shoes you've been wearing for 6 months. Like those little things do make a difference. You can have the piercings, the tattoos, and let your personality come through, but you should have, also a cleaner image that comes through. People look for that. And then I think the other part is, do you make eye contact? Do you shake a hand? Are you kind of drowning out during the interview? Like, are you just kind of like, look like you're more focused on anything else? Are you looking at your phone during the interview? Like, that's definitely one of those things that you want to be completely focused on the interview, be all there, and I think that's another part of it is being focused and you're there, you're answering the questions, your tone, sit up straight, that goes a long way. Not just slump down and casual. And I think the other thing is have a conversation. Don't be afraid to really get to know this person and have a friendly conversation. Be a good conversationalist and listen. And I think another good tip would be a good listening tip is when you're listening to a conversation, pick up on something that they said there, that they said in the conversation, and then ask a question about it. So it shows that you're a good listener. If you hear something in this conversation, come back and ask a question about it. And I think that's a good conversation strategy, but it's also good in an interview because it lets a future employer know that you're listening. So I think that I threw out a lot of good ideas there for you.
Yeah, no, that was great. I have at least 4 or 5 for sure. Active listening is a huge one. And one thing that I like that you said, you were talking about appearance, and I was actually talking to my wife about this the other day. And with appearance, sometimes it's easy to think, you're thinking appearance in terms of yourself, right? So you're like, I want to look nice because it's, that's what I want to portray. But the thing is, when you're interacting with someone else, when you look nice, you smell nice, and you've got a smile on your face, whatever, it actually makes the other person feel good. So perceiving your own appearance in terms of I'm actually doing this to serve someone else, that was just a thought I had the other day. And it kind of changed my paradigm a little bit, because then it's not like, I want to, be wealthier or look better or whatever for my own sake. I actually want that because I realize that other people in my presence, it means a lot to them. So that's just a good way to look at it. But then the other thing you said, kind of getting really practical, as far as scheduling goes, and being on time, what you have in your fingertips, having your iPhone is amazing. I learned how to use the calendar on my iPhone when I was, 15 or something like that. And I've been doing it ever since, where literally if you say, okay, I'll be there at, 11 o'clock, what you do is you pull out your phone right then, you create an event for, 10:45 or whatever, you put it in there, you say, meet with so-and-so, or you put down what you said your expectation was in your calendar right there, and then you're alerted for it. And it seems like, maybe that's common sense, but literally that speaks volumes to people when you're proactive about saying, okay, I'm going to do this and this and this, and boom, it's right here in my phone, scheduled beforehand. So I'll be there right on time, and you can expect this from me. So technology is your best friend. It can really be used to help you as far as keeping your commitments goes. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you're right about the appearance too. And a good example, a quick one would be, this Zoom call. I'm at my house. I'm not at work or anything, and I've been doing a lot of work from home. And before I looked and I was like, okay, we're gonna go on here in about 15 minutes. I should probably put on a nicer shirt than my sweatshirt that I've been walking around in 2 days with. I was like, I probably should maybe do a quick hair adjustment, because I'm looking like I've just been roaming around the house for a couple of days, because that's what I've been doing. But I think, hey, I want to come off good in this and, interview and kind of make sure that, make the right impact. And, first impressions are lasting impressions. And I think that's how you want to come off. So I made sure, hey, I want to put a nice shirt on. And, I think as soon as I saw you, Chris, we both had nice smiles on our face, and it goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So going into kind of the subject of young leaders, and you kind of already touched on this, but I would love if you have any more thoughts. What are maybe one or two nuggets of truth or advice specific to a younger leader? Maybe outside of the interview process, what's maybe something that could be custom tailored to maybe a younger person pertaining to leadership that you've picked up over the years? And like I said, I know you already mentioned a few things, but I just wanted to really drill down to that and make sure that you didn't have any other thoughts about that for maybe a younger leader.
Yeah, I'll give like two. I'm going to give an easy one and a hard one. How's that?
Awesome.
Okay,
Perfect.
so the easy one would be is, whoever you're leading, remember you're always on stage, always. So whether it's before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting, before practice, after practice, whether you're on a quick phone call, whatever it is, whenever you're gathering with the group that you're leading, you're on stage. They're watching you. They're going to follow your lead. If you let so-and-so be late, then they know that everybody can be late. You get what you put up with. So that's very important. You have to understand that your eyes are always on you. They're always watching you. So you have to make sure that you're always leading, that you're always on. If you think, oh, I can say this off the hand, kind of off the cuff kind of saying or something like that, that's just bad. You can't, you got to realize that people are always watching you. If you think, that's where we see a lot of times with these college sports programs, it comes back years later that they had maybe some kind of sexual harassment or some kind of suits against them. And really what it was is it's the culture. The coach, probably somebody made an off the cuff remark and they let it go. And then 6 years, 7 years later in the program, it's worse, the way that they're treating people. And it's because they didn't cut it off from the very beginning. So it's very important that you're always on stage. If something's not appropriate, you shut it off, but you make sure that you understand that somebody's always watching you. So that's the easy one, that you just realize you're always on. Now, the hard leadership tip that takes a lot of training and really is very valuable, but it's very, very hard and takes practice, is it goes back to what you mentioned before about humility. You have to realize that if something goes wrong in the organization that you're leading, it's your fault. Sounds very simple, but it's not. And I'm talking anything, whether you're not there and it's something that you weren't there, you didn't even have anything you feel like to do with it, but you did, you're the leader. So you have to realize that no matter where the fault is in your organization, you're responsible, and it was your fault. So when these things happen in my organization, I'll take a long walk, and I'll take the dog out, we'll go for a long walk. And a lot of times what happens is, I start out the walk saying, there's no way that was my fault. There's no way. I wasn't there. I would never let that happen. I wouldn't never approve of it. Like that was their fault. Like, I can't believe they would say that, or they would do that, or we would treat a customer like that. Like, I would never, that's not my fault. Then the onion starts to peel back a little bit. Okay, well, maybe I should have told so-and-so this. Maybe we had a meeting. I said it 10 times. Maybe I should have said 11. I didn't have a visual chart. Maybe I should have had a chart that explains that this isn't how we treat a customer. All right. So, then you start to peel back, say, okay, this is why it was my fault. I can turn around and walk home now, but that's kind of the thought behind it, is when you can take the faults in your organization, blame them on yourself, and then teach from those, that's when you become an effective leader.
Yeah, that is so good. And, imagine if everyone in your organization took that personal responsibility. I mean, you would thrive, because not only would everyone else's backs be covered, but you'd probably be doing more than is required of you, and the organization would grow. So that's a great personal responsibility. And I think that's in any area of life, whether you're leading an organization or you're leading your family or you're just leading yourself. At the end of the day, you're responsible for your own growth. And that's really, there's a lot of, that's an honorable thing to be able to take responsibility for every aspect of your life. That's a I love it. I love it. It's not easy, but it's
Yeah.
very good.
And I think I'll throw in there, Chris, you mentioned family. I think a lot of
Mm,
times people, you split up with a spouse or something and people want to say, well, it was all their fault.
mm,
But when you're really honest, like, there's things that you did that probably caused that situation too. And you just got to be honest with yourself. And sometimes it's very hard to be honest with yourself. It really is,
yeah.
and sometimes you don't even have to tell anybody else that it was your fault or what faults you had in it. But when you can come to the realization that this is where I went wrong, whether it's a really tough family situation or a tough work situation, when you can be honest with yourself, that's when you grow. And
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose is to grow so that you can be a better leader, you can be a better parent, you can be a better husband or wife. Like you have to just get to a point where you can really grow. And part of that growing process is definitely being honest with yourself and being able to see where you can be better.
Yeah, totally. There's a term one of my mentors talks about, and he uses the term forced change versus basically internally enforced change. And the idea is, if you don't impose certain limitations or changes upon yourself, eventually life will impose those upon you. So it's better to be proactive and be a little introspective if you need to, or take full responsibility, then let things go and then kind of let life just hit you, because either way change is coming. It's just a matter of how you receive that change, because if you can impose that upon yourself in small doses, when something bigger happens, it's part of change management, to be honest. When a bigger change happens, you're prepared for that, and the impact and the blow isn't going to be as hard because you've been self-imposing some of that upon yourself before it ever hits. So I think it's super important to do that, whether it's in, like you said, family or business or your own self. Um, let's talk a little bit about favorite leaders. You mentioned it at the beginning, but I'm curious if you have any other ones. Do you have maybe one or two leaders that you look up to and admire? It can be fictional or real. And if so, why do you look up to them? Why do you admire them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Just to go back real quick on change, I think that's
Yeah.
really important, Chris, that you brought that up because it's maybe
Mm,
something that I underestimate in a leader. But change is part of life,
yeah.
and you have to know that the change is going to happen. And when you lead an organization, change happens all the time. COVID's a great example.
Mm,
A lot of businesses failed and a lot of businesses thrived. Um, the ones that weren't used to change definitely had a lot harder of a road to go because they couldn't just try and adapt or pivot or whatever fancy words you want to use. But change is so important. We embrace change. And I think
mm,
that's what you have to do as leaders. You have to absolutely have to embrace it. And when you find that you have people underneath you that don't embrace change, then you really have to work with them and point out the why. Why is the change so important? Sometimes people underneath you have to understand why they're doing something.
mm,
For maybe on the upper management side, people will just go ahead and they'll do it because it's their job. But a lot of times people want to know why they're doing something. So when change happens, you have to make sure you explain it very well to the people underneath you so that they can buy into the difference and really make the outcome be the outcome that you want it to be. So I wanted to mention that before I get in
yeah.
because I think you're so right on change for sure. But as far as leaders go, being a sports guy from a fan, really, I was hesitant to pull out like the homer pick here, but I think I have to. A Pittsburgh fan. My leader that I look up to is Ben Rothlesberger, and
Mm,
I think what's interesting about that is I've seen the way that he's matured over his career. And I think that's one of the reasons I really like him so much. I'm 43 at the time right now, and Ben Roethlisberger is 38. So over his 18, 19-year-old career, I've watched the 20-year-old kid come into the NFL and seen him develop into a leader. So that's what I've liked. As at the same time I've developed into a leader. So, we're watching a young guy that would go to the bars and party all the time. And then when people would talk about why he had a bad pass, he'd blame it on the receivers, or he'd get on his radio show and blame it on the coach's call or whatever it would be. But over time, if you see an interview from Ben, he takes all the blame. Hey, I
mm,
wasn't good enough today. I threw those picks, and and the media always bait him. Well, so-and-so missed the block, and that's why he got sacked 7 times. He's like, well, I just didn't move fast enough. It was my fault. I should have picked up that read. And like, he didn't do that 10 or 15 years ago, but in the last maybe 5 to 6, 7 years, he's so good at taking the blame and building his team up. And then, this last season, they had such a tough loss to the Browns in the playoffs. And there's this famous picture of him just sitting on the bench at the end and kind of being the last one there, taking it all in. And I think you could just see the emotion. And then the next day they're asking him about it. And he just, same thing, took all the blame. I shouldn't have thrown 5 picks. And they're asking him about all this other stuff. And it just all goes back to, himself, of how he could have been better, and he'll be better. And he's going to work harder in the offseason to be better next year. And I think that's so important to see that, the way he matured, and then the way that he speaks to the media. So I think that, to me, I love watching him develop as a leader. And I think I've developed very similar. When you're younger, you do a lot of different things than you do when you're older. And that has been one. And then a second one that I like to point out was one that I really didn't know too much about, but the name is Elon Musk. And I think when you hear different things about Elon Musk, it's real easy to think crazy, weird, because all the space stuff, or you're not buying into the electric cars like Tesla, and you just think like, who is this scientist type guy or whatever it is. But I've heard some interviews, and they're really interesting. And one of the interviews he gave was talking about when he first started his business, and he was at the factory, and he would sleep there. And they would say, well, where did you sleep? Like, did you have a room to sleep in? Did you sleep in the boardroom? Like, where would you sleep? He said, no, I would sleep in a room with all the windows in the middle of the factory, so all the staff knew I was sleeping there. He said, I wanted people to see that I was going to work harder than anybody. I was asking them to do things that were impossible, that haven't been done before. And I wanted them to see that I was willing to put in the work too. So he said, no, I would sleep, right in a room with all windows, so everybody, when they came in, could see that I was sleeping. Or if they were leaving, we had 24-hour shifts. So if they're leaving at 4 a.m, they see that, here's the owner sleeping on the floor. And he said, I'd have a sleeping bag on a concrete floor. And I just thought that was, to me, I was like, wow, that's a great leader. Like, that's somebody who's willing to show, hey, what I'm doing. And when people see that, they buy into it. They work harder because they appreciate how hard you're working.
Yeah. Oh man, absolutely. Yeah. One of the sayings we have is, at the end of the podcast, I actually say it, but it's the idea that banners are hailed at the beginning and medals are awarded at the end, but leaders are forged in the long dark in between. If you're leading, you're taking the greatest risk. And that's true. If you're leading, you're not only the one out in front, leading the charge, having all the exposure, but you're having exposure to opposition as well as the people that you are leading. And it's extremely admirable, to be able to see someone that I'm following, who's saying, I'm gonna serve, and I'm gonna get in the mud with you, and I'm gonna get in the mud before you and longer than you. That, to me, is admirable, and I will follow someone who displays those characteristics any day. The other thing I like, you said when you were talking about Ben, you mentioned how he was at the bench at the end, and he was taking it all in. And I think there's a really important distinction to make between being condemned with something and taking it all in and assessing it in order to grow and develop later on. I think that's key in leadership. Is a lot of times leaders are actually made in those times when it's just you and it's the mental game. Condemnation will cut off your ability to lead really, really quick. But if you can see, if you can take responsibility, and you can say, okay, I failed here and here and here, but here's how I'm going to improve. Here's how I'm going to grow. That's the beauty of sports, is, we have next season. That's why I love the idea of coaching, kind of like you said, is because the mentality is always forward moving. It's not, we suck and now we're done. It's, no, you know what, there's a next season, and we're going to work even harder. We're going to kind of patch up our weaknesses. We're going to, see where we can improve and grow for the point of, proving it next season. So I think if you can, in the times when things are difficult, don't condemn yourself, but see it as an opportunity to grow. I think that's really important to distinguish between that when you're kind of going through the mental game a little bit.
Yeah. And I think just to add in there real quick, Chris, is, when you think about these athletes who make hundreds of millions of dollars. Here's somebody like Ben, who's 38 years old. He's not coming back for the money. He's not like he's not coming back for the money. Like, sure, he still wants to be paid, fair market value of his skills. And I can understand that, but like, why do these guys come back? It's because they want a chance to lead their team to a championship.
Totally.
They're leaders. That's what they are. They're competitors, and they want to lead. And that's what really gravitates to me to certain athletes is, here they are at the end of their career, and they feel like, I still got enough in the tank to lead my team, and some of the skills get diminished, the throwing skills, the running skills, but they actually value their leadership skills to win championships. They know that they can get guys maybe they can't run any faster, but they can get the 23-year-old lineman to block better because, they believe in their quarterback, or they can get the wide receiver to practice more routes and practice catching routes more because they can get these guys to buy in that they can win because they believe in the quarterback. So it's not so much, Ben's got all these skills that he can still give, but his leadership skills, he's developed so much over his career that he can really, that's what he can give to the team. So I think a lot of times, you get the regular sports commentator, somebody's out there is like, he's washed up. Look at this, look at that. But you're not looking at how valuable his leadership skills really are to this young team. So that's, just want to throw that in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good, man. Well, I mean, that's pretty much all I have as far as questions. Is there anything else you'd like to share that's on your mind, or?
I appreciate that question. And I just think, for the young leaders out there, if you're really trying to figure out where you're going in your life, it is a very difficult question when you're so young, and you can start to feel like everything and, you have all the answers. And I think really you just have to be a sponge. That's what I kind of leave you with is be a sponge. When you get around a great leader, take some of the best things you learn from them. Don't worry about the things that they don't do right, but take the 3 or 4 or 5 things that they do great and put that into your war chest, so to speak. Then when you get to the next point in your life and you're with a different leader and they do things a certain way and they've got some really great skills, take those 2 or 3 great skills, put those in your war chest. And before you know it, you're going to be older, wiser, and you're going to have a lot of these great skills that you took from the great leaders who helped you along your journey. And you'll be able to use those to pass forward to the people that you lead.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Nick, it's been a pleasure. If our audience wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Absolutely. So you can find me at nickbogacz.com, which is Bogacz, like animal, cat, zebra. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. My podcast each week is the Business Equation Podcast. And you also can go ahead and text me at 412-818-3402. Really appreciate being on this podcast today, Chris. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Nick, for your time. The pleasure was mine. And that wraps it up for this episode. Thanks a lot, Nick.
Thank you.